estimated to be 10 to the 79th power number of electrons in the universe. And chess has a total of an estimated 10 to the 102nd possible combinations. With statistics like these, it could be easy for a person who has never played chess before to be intimidated by all the different pieces and all their different functions. Well, after today, you won't need to worry about those fears anymore because you'll have a good understanding of what each piece does and how you could possibly use them to put your opponent into checkmate. We're going to be talking about these chronologically speaking in the order that they're placed. So first up is the rook. Rooks can move forwards or backwards or side to side. They can move however many squares that they want at a time. However, there cannot be another piece in the way of those squares. And if there is, well, that gives them the opportunity to take them. So take that, pawn. The next piece we're going to be talking about is the knight. Knights move in a very unique way. They're able to move two directions one way and then one direction another way. For example, they move in L's. You could go 2 squares forward and 1 square to the left, or to the right. 2 squares to the right, 1 up or down, 2 squares backwards, and 1 left or 1 right, and so on. I think you get the gist of that. So, for example, if there was a pawn right here, right 2 squares ahead of it, and 1 square to the side of that, this rook, or knight rather, would be able to take him. Mwahaha. There you go, horsies. The next piece, chronologically speaking, would be the bishop. The bishop is right next to the knights, and they're, in a way, the opposite of rooks, because rather than moving forwards, backwards, side to side, they can move diagonally, which means that they're going to be on the same colored square throughout the entire game. For example, there was a rook in the corner here. This bishop would be able to move as far as they wanted and take the rook. The next, arguably the most powerful piece on the chessboard, is going to be your queen. Your queen has the power combination of both the rook and the bishop, meaning it could go forwards, backwards, side to side, and diagonally. So, a lot of people tend to want to keep the queen around for that reason. If the rook were there, the queen would be able to kill it. Or if it were there. Or if it were here. My, getting a little close there, aren't we, rook? You always know where the queen is because of the saying, queen on her color. White queen goes on white square. Black queen would go on black square. Your next, and somewhat underwhelming compared to your other defenses, at least initially, are your pawns. Your pawns line up your second row. And these guys can move either 1 square or 2 squares on their first move. However, the 2 square rule is only an exception for the very first one. This is because, historically speaking, pawns could only move 1 square at a time. However, they changed that rule somewhere along the 16th century because people noticed their attention spans were dwindling a bit. But after their first move is made, pawns can only move 1 square at a time. A strange thing about pawns to note, though, is that even though they can only move forward and they can only move 1 square at a time normally, in the case of attacking, they cannot attack going 1 square ahead of them. They can only kill opponents diagonally. So, for example, if 2 pawns were across from each other, like this, neither of them would be able to move at all. They would only be able to kill them if they were diagonal to them, like this. Haha. Oh, one more thing to note about pawns, however, is there is something very special about them, which makes them very useful to keep around, especially during the later parts of the game. If you manage to get a pawn to the opposite side of the board, meaning the very last row on your side, you are allowed to promote your pawn to whatever kind of piece you want. Doesn't matter if that piece is existing on the board or not. The two exceptions being a pawn and another king, because there can only be one king, and I don't know why you'd want to promote your pawn to a pawn. That's not much of a raise there. But that's why in chess tournaments, you will always find a spare queen next to the timer, because in most instances, people promote their pawns to queens just because they're the most overall powerful piece to have on the board and the most likely target. And your final and most important piece of them all is going to be your king right here. This is what you spend your entire game trying to protect. If your king is in a position that it cannot move without putting itself or without getting itself out of check, then what else can I do here? Then that means the player wins. The player whoever put the king into this position wins. This is also called checkmate. It doesn't matter how many pieces an opponent has on the board. Once the king is in checkmate, the game is over. There are 8 moves that you can make where you could put an opponent's king into checkmate within 2 moves, and 300 in 3 moves. Well, now you know the basic fundamentals of chess, so the next time that you are challenged to a chess game, you won't be afraid to take them on. We learn about how to set up the board, the functions of each of their pieces, and why they're helpful. You have a great day.